All right, welcome everyone. Now the price of fuel has markedly increased in a few weeks. Your electricity bill too could go up as government tightens its squeeze in order to raise more revenue. The courts provided some relief by throwing out the minimum tax requirement for businesses, this despite their health. Tonight, with all due respect, we ask, is there a case for such punitive taxes in a declining economy like ours? Or is the government just living beyond its means? Our guest tonight, Mushai Kuniha, chairman of the Kenya Association of Manufacturers. Karibu sana to the program. Wanjiru Gikonyo, coordinator TISA, for the second time on the show. We love you here.
Thank you.
And for the first time, Victor Gola, head of public policy research analysis at KEPSA.
Thank you so much.
Glad to have you all. Let's go straight to the counties and what we've had you tell us to set the basis of our discussion tonight.
Kama boda na feel uzito sahi ya maisha kuhusiana na hii uchumi imekuwa mbaya. Sababu ya kwanza, mafuta imepanda, hakuna abiria kwa sasa kwa sababu mafuta ikipanda inaharibu kila kitu in general.
Hata ukifanya biashara faida imereduce, imekuwa kidogo. Cost of production ya maisha kama ni farming, mambo imekuwa juu sana, hata sisi kuishi imekuwa ngumu. Na unajua Mount Elgon sana watu tunategemea mambo ya farming. Kwa hivyo inputs ziko juu. Gharama ya kubeba hizo inputs kupeleka katika mashamba zetu niko juu, lakini bei ya bidhaa pia si sawa.
Wenye wanapitisha hiyo mswada ni wabunge kule bungeni. Saa ile wanapitisha hawajui effect yake itakuwa namna gani. So saa hii hawa ndio wametangulia kulia ati mafuta imepandishwa bei. Na hawa ndio walipandisha nini? Waliweka mswada wakasign, president akaenda akaweka mkono. Alafu sasa ndio hii sisi tunaumia. Hata sisi saa hii tumeshindwa.
Huwezi kununua sukari chini ya kilo moja shilingi 130. Kila kitu kumeongezwa bei. Hali ni mbaya. Tumepigwa na COVID. Imenyanyasa watu. Imeangamiza watu. Serikali yetu pia inatuongezea gharama juu ya gharama. Kama mafuta ikiongezwa, definitely the following morning utasikia mkate imeongezwa, maziwa imeongezwa, dawa imeongezwa. Sasa jamani, hii maisha ni ngumu sana.
Watu wana strain sana. Kama sisi watu wa Nduthi, unapepa mtu unamwambia mafuta yaongeza, kienda kumwambia ongeze bei, anasema hata mimi sina hela. Sasa inakuwa ni vigumu sana kwa vile unaona mwananchi huyu wa kawaida mwenye ako chini kabisa, ni vigumu sana kupata hiyo pesa.
Mafuta ndio kila kitu, hata transport mtoto akienda shule imeongezeka. Sasa uchumi iko vibaya, mafuta ikirudi chini ndio kila kitu itakaa sawa.
All right, welcome to the program. We are taking your question on #WATR on Twitter and everywhere else that you can find us. But tonight, let's be honest. Let's try and find out where the problem actually is. We've seen what people on the counties are saying, and we'll go back to the counties a bit more. But let's start with you, Chairman. The question, the single most important question, we've seen this back and forth between MPs saying, IPRA, keep setting the prices. In 2 weeks, the price might actually go up. Who should we blame on this rising cost of fuel right now?
Yeah, like you say, James, with all due respect, parliamentarians, I think, are being disingenuous because EPRA is following a formula that is set in law. So the people who made the law are the ones who should be answering how did they come up with this formula. What happened just after COVID came in, we had a big drop in the prices of oil globally. And I think the revenue got worried that they are not getting enough on the fuel. There's what they get from fuel.
Right.
And they started seeing this is not enough. So we decided to raise some taxes on that. So actually in 2020, we raised the taxes on fuel. But at that point, as consumers, we didn't notice because the global price of fuel was low.
Yes.
But now as COVID is coming through and demand is coming back, the price of fuel goes up and the formula just calculates.
Still the same.
It's the same formula. It's calculating itself. And it is the formula. It is not, EPRA just looks at the formula and applies it. So basically, we have to adjust the formula. So if parliamentarians really wanted to do something about it, or even say national government, it'd say, let us introduce this bill to change the formula. Then we'll resolve the price.
No one is actually doing what Chama is talking about here. You know, everyone is shift blaming. The Senate today had summoned two CSs, CS for petroleum and CS for energy. And the question is essentially to do what?
Yes, well, Senate, I think, has possibly less powers compared to the National Assembly, because when it comes to the national fiscal policy, the national monetary policy, the approvals go through the National Assembly. The Senate is doing, I think it's doing a great service in terms of bringing the issue to light. They also commissioned, directed, I'm not sure the word is directed, but they got the central bank governor and they got the controller of budget to issue reports in August, and another one, I think, maybe end of August, early September, on the status of debt. So they're raising the questions and documenting the facts. But the question is, one, we know it's government, we know there's irresponsibility. I think what we're grappling with is what to do. And from where we sit as we have the Okoa Uchumi Coalition, we've done an analysis of the situation. And part of the problem is that government is messaging and misdiagnosing the issue.
Right.
We have a full-blown economic crisis due to government irresponsibility, irresponsible borrowing, placing that money in places that aren't productive and bringing back revenue. You then have the fiscal policy, which is heavy taxation. You've got the wrong kind of monetary policy. And all this is circulating, driving down revenues, making it difficult for business to operate. And so we are in this kind of circle where the economy is not performing as it should, but we are being messaged that it is. And we're being told we're in a fiscal consolidation program, it's going to sort out these problems. But really, we are not dealing with the magnitude of the problem.
Right.
And Parliament is part and parcel of that challenge. So they bluster, they posture because, you know, it's optics.
Yeah.
Once they've spoken and they've been seen, they then go back and get into the campaign mode, aligning for 2022. So there's a real lack of seriousness about the extent of the crisis, and it's very worrying.
This is really grim. I was hoping you had some, some light things to, protest. But Victor, so the question is this, today it's actually Senator James Orengo says this is perhaps the worst parliament that we've ever experienced, in his own words. Maybe I'll find that clip and play it, but it was on our news. You deal with these matters every day, and I want, from where you sit, would you say this is a full-blown economic crisis, and you're messaging it wrongly from where you sit, and say, look, all these bills that we put together, it's increasing the cost of doing business, obviously shrinking the space, for businesses to make profits, and thereby it affects, all employees, so there's an effect of that. Would you say that's what's happening currently?
I think fuel pricing is very sensitive to the rest of the economy, the rest of sectors, in terms of how it spiralizes to the rest of the sectors. So it's not just a matter of how it affects transportation, but also the producers.
Right.
An increase by 7 shillings may spiral into a larger increase in several other things. So whether they're the fruit vendors, whether they're the farmers, if it's the price of fertilizer, the people who are, railing their cargo from one point to another. So it has a larger spiral effect than we can imagine. So, and that's why you find that a small increase really sparks off increase in price
across the board.
Across the board.
Yeah.
So, and I think that's something that we need to be sensitive to. And when Parliament was approving this formula for EPRA to use, I think they missed bigly on their oversight role. To come back and look back at their action and complain about it is to be indigenous, as Mishai was saying it.
Yes.
Yes. So we have Parliament that should actually play their regulatory role, their oversight role, not regulatory, oversight role, properly And not just on fuel prices, actually, even also on borrowing. I'll come back to that, but also on borrowing, because that's also another issue.
Right.
KRA is here with targets that, it cannot possibly meet within the existing market. You have a small basket of taxpayers and a very large one. And so KRA is looking for all means possible to meet its own target. The one other last thing is, I do not get the justification for all the 9 levies that are in the petroleum products. All right? I do not get that. One would imagine that even if you have fuel levy, all right, it's meant to cushion Kenyans when global prices go up. And at that time, you use...
Wasn't that the premise?
You use the buffer,
yeah,
all right, to cushion Kenyans from further rise in prices of fuel. And these levies that I do not quite understand, excise duty one would understand, road maintenance levy one would understand, petroleum development levy, I do not understand that. Petroleum regulatory levy, railways development levy, VAT I would understand, import declaration fee, all these account for 50% of the fuel price, right?
Yeah.
But if we were to build a buffer and protect Kenyans from the impact of, because the prices are set at a global level and we may not have control of the landing price, right? But are all these levies being used to develop petroleum, processing in Kenya, right? Why would we have petroleum development levy when we did away with the Mombasa refinery, right? We have deposits which are not developing. So why? What's petroleum development levy for?
So the question then I think that generally we circle back to is with this over-taxation of Kenyans, and everyone feels it. I'll go to, after the break, to the minimum tax conversation and what that would have portended and what it means.
Yeah.
But Mushai, we are being overtaxed.
Yes, I think we definitely agree. The taxation is high, and I think just to pick up on a point that Victor is raising is also the multiplicity of the taxes, and one of the things we see is also the creativity of the taxman in creating new taxes. It's like, let's find another thing to tax every other time.
Yeah.
And at the moment, actually, from a manufacturer's perspective, we see it not just from a national government, but you see it at the counties, where they are,
becoming creative.
Very creative in the taxes that they can create. And then you have also other bodies. For instance, at the moment, we have the AFA, the Agricultural and Food Authority, deciding that they want to there's a fee, a levy of 2% on importation of peanut, importation of oil,
right,
and all these other products. Remember at some point they wanted to tax bees. It's like this hunger to just take money is so high. And the question that we keep asking, and we must ask, I think fundamentally is, and the economists have been telling us this, we should start with what are we producing as a country? And say, if we produce, 100 billion, I guess is about $100 billion is our GDP.
Right.
You say, what percentage of that maybe should be for government? And we just say, that's it. Government, you need to fit within that amount. You and I, when we are paid our salary or wherever we get our income, we say, this is what I have, and I must live within
the means.
These means. Yes. This is what I do.
You don't go borrow to your neighbors and raise your debt ceiling from the neighbors.
Or if you do, you can't do that. How long?
You'll get caught.
You're going to get caught eventually.
Yeah.
And I suspect that is the problem where we are, because what has been happening is that government has been deciding what they want to, what they want to buy, what they want to do, all these projects they want to do, and then now they come back and say, oh, now who is going to pay for this? In manufacturing, for instance, we are sadly at about 7.6% of GDP at the moment. Even with the latest figures, we've not been growing despite all intentions, government statements, everything. We all want to grow, but it's not growing. But we pay about 18% of the tax revenue. Whatever KRA pays is 18% of that. Because we are an easy target. A factory is very easy to find because I can't move my factory. At least the motorcycle guy can move to the next stop. My factory cannot move. So they know where to find me. And they will keep coming. And what we find is that they keep coming with new taxes. The latest creation is excise. I think, in fact, I want to slightly disagree with Victor. I don't know why we have excise on fuel.
On fuel, actually.
You know, what is excise tax? You know, originally excise was a thing about, it was a sin tax. Yeah?
Yes.
So there are certain practices you want to make a bit more expensive, smoking, drinking, etc. Now we have it on water. We have it on plastic containers, even for medicine. We are expanding this. We have it on your mobile phone. You send M-Pesa, there's an excise tax. You go to your bank, there's an excise tax. And it keeps growing. At the moment, our big fight is they're growing it at the rate of inflation every year.
Wow.
And what has happened, actually, we saw between last year and this year, the excise take is actually falling. Because you can raise your tax so high that, you know, people stop paying, people find other ways of doing it. We'll have more on that.
We need to have more, but I just want to go back to your point on some message that we saw earlier on. Someone asked, why do we invest more in land than in manufacturing? 49 in 50 Kenyans invest in land, whereas only one will think of starting a manufacturing company. There was a response to that by one Wahome. He says, starting a manufacturing unit in Kenya is like annoying the government. With all due respect, take a short break. We'll be right back.
I like that.
Welcome back. You're watching With All Due Respect. Now, we've been talking about the question of taxes and the multiplicity of the taxes, and you have some questions and some responses as well on Twitter. Let me just go to them right away before we get back to our conversation. Makonge on Twitter says, who or what should we blame versus who should we engage or what should we do differently? How can we diversify income streams? It's clear Kenyans are on their own. Going by precedents, the cost of living goes up but never comes down. To start with, how on earth did a semi-developed third world economy adopt an unsustainable federal system of government suited for the likes of the USA? Joe Munju, with all due respect, who budgets for funds they don't have, borrowing without care of at what expense these loans get repaid, and other long stories, with all due respect. Sylvia Kangara, where others formed government as a social contract to protect their right to life and property, a good life and pursuit of happiness, African governments were formed to violently civilize the natives, to civilize the code word for exploitation and oppression. Look around, with all due respect. There's some strong feedback there, but it's all valid with all due respect, of course, as in this program. Let's go to this question of, so our tax revenue is what, about 1.4 trillion, but we have a budget for 3 trillion, right? Surely this is a regressing economy. It's purely black and white, right? But we keep doing it.
Yes. I think there's two things to look at on that side. We are going through a COVID period. And economists will tell you that what happens during, when you have shocks in the system, you find that the private sector cannot spend because, you know, people have been laid off, companies or firms are reluctant to invest and so on. So you want some sort of public sector spending to fill in that gap. And if you look at what's happened in all other economies, the public sector comes in to try and spend a bit just to keep the economy going. But the trick is, when the cycle is opposite, when you don't have shocks, when it is normal, that is the time now when you want to reverse a little bit, where the government wants to spend less, let the private sector spend more and do a little bit more. But we did not do that. So like somebody said at the beginning of COVID was there was this whole issue of pre-existing conditions. So Kenya was caught with these pre-existing conditions of these very high commitments, very high debt level, relatively very high debt level. And so you're caught again in between because we
didn't have a lot of wiggle room, essentially.
We didn't have a lot of wiggle room. But even after saying that, the amount of spending and the deficit that we've created, I think I was seeing some numbers this week, we're talking about a 1 trillion shilling deficit, is also a bit beyond...
it's irresponsible.
It is, yeah.
It really is responsible. If you call it what it is. And you said, when you're making your comment earlier on about the questions of, looking at this economy, and we call it a full-blown, crisis,
yes,
and we're not calling it as such.
Well, Treasury is not. And because it's not in their interest to call it as such, to call it a crisis, because they still need to borrow. But I mean, since possibly around 2017, definitely if you look at government figures, since 2015, the increase in the tax revenues plateaued and began to go down.
Yes.
So government ran into trouble very quickly because of investments made very early on in 2014, 2015, the commercial borrowing. The borrowing was then put into projects that the central bank governor in his report to Senate flagged as not having a return on investment. So you borrow heavily, you borrow expensively, put it into projects that then are not bringing back. You know, so that's a hole that you have to keep filling. Then you've borrowed in hard currency. So that means you're actually drawing money out of the local economy because, again, exports are falling. Note, because of the misaligned policy, macroeconomic fiscal policy, we have a situation where exports have been falling. FDI has been falling, so foreign direct investment is falling. You know, more people are pulling out. Kenya's competitiveness on the regional market is also falling. So the crisis is actually compounding. So it looks, you know, we were looking at debt. We thought, my God, these guys have borrowed, it's budgeted corruption, and, you know, we can't track this. And so we engaged some researchers from Kenyatta University and told them, just explain this to us. It doesn't make sense. You know, these things aren't adding up. And they came back and said, at the end of the day, this is, you're looking at debt.
So that is just one thing.
The debt problem has spiraled into a full-blown economic crisis. And we had a very good conversation where representatives from the Kenya Association of Manufacturers were also there. And the advice was we need to call the problem, and we need a solution that's commensurate to the scale of the problem, that looks at the structural problems, some of the problems that Victor is talking about, and also that Mushai is talking about, around when you have agriculture employing about, what is it, 54% of the population, but then the contribution into the GDP is very small because the productivity is very little. That's a big misalignment. So you need to be putting your investment into ensuring this agriculture is productive. Manufacturing, like Mushai said, you cannot afford to have such a narrow manufacturing base in a country. These are big structural problems that we should be talking about. But what has government done? For political expediency, they have, you know, kind of reduced this to a COVID problem. We need to do a fiscal consolidation. Some of the measures are good, but they are not enough. So it's unfortunate and it's scary to watch. It's scary to watch because, you know, people have lost jobs. Businesses have shut down.
Yeah.
It's very difficult economic times. And in fact, the Parliamentary Budget Office was saying 2021 will be worse than 2020 because people have exhausted their savings. We are heading into an election. This is a, you know, the rain we are heading into a drought. And then government increases taxes in that context. You're like...
Isn't it scary that this is not part of political discourse currently? Because sort of all the people who've said they want to run for president, I think 4 or 5 right now, none of them really has flagged the economic situation. They just keep on coming up with these sort of like buzzwords that don't address this problem. We had an entire Eurobond that couldn't be traced and exactly what it did. But we are fine. We're okay. We're going to move like that didn't happen. Victor.
Put me on the spot on the Eurobond. It's been in the discussion for many years, and I don't think we are going to find a different answer to exactly how the money was channeled to the different projects. But we take it that actually...
It is what it is.
It is what it is.
It isn't what it is. You know, the problem we have is big, and we don't know how to confront it. Why? We passed a constitution and we expected we would now have good governance. And we've got even worse governance than before. So not only do we have the structural problems that existed before, we then have a government that's violating the constitution willy-nilly. Actually, you have business associations having to go to court to negotiate with government about tax.
Right.
Because in the budget process is not open.
Tone deaf. the entire political class, just not government, because different people will walk in and they will do exactly the same thing.
Well, I'm not sure they'll do exactly the same thing. We had better economic management with the NARC administration.
Okay, I want to move to the minimum tax conversation, right? Because it was fatal. Everyone had to do it. Because
I wanted to say something on borrowing.
Right.
Yeah. And you brought in the Eurobond, which threw me off because
You're not ready for it.
Right. No, but I'm ready for something else.
Sure.
Infrastructure is good. Infrastructure is good, and I do not think there's any country that can develop without borrowing. But responsible borrowing is what we do need. The government has to borrow responsibly, not to dry off credit to the private sector that will need it, and to borrow exactly what it needs, right? What it has planned for. For instance, recently they tossed an infrastructure bond, and they were expecting 70 billion. The market realized 150. They took 110 billion. The difference of 40 billion, all right? It's like if you went to a commercial bank and you need 5 million, but you find that you can actually get 8.
You take the 8.
Your need was 5.
Yes.
But now you take 8. The other 3 million is likely to be wasted, all right? And that is actually the problem in this borrowing. The serious appetite in borrowing. The 40 billion should have been left in the market to service the credit needs of businesses. And that is actually the problem we have with borrowing.
I want to get, I mean, it's all depressing. I want to get to the minimum tax conversation because we have a lot of things to cover and move it forward. The question on how, that was put out, and my colleagues, Julian, our business editor, says there's a place and space for minimum tax in this country and in business. Do you agree first?
We'd have questions about that. I think what happened with minimum tax, and it's also echoing from our earlier conversations, it seems that, the economy is not well, and one of the best signs of whether the economy is well or not is when there's a doctor called IMF knocking on your door.
He's checking in.
He's checking in, he's taking your temperature, and he's giving you results. So it seems for some reason the government had this idea that, or IMF has, we're told they've pushed this idea that there's too many tax reliefs.
Yeah.
That, private sector are getting too many tax reliefs. And here we are talking about too many high taxes. So I'm not sure where the mix-up is, where that misalignment is. But there's this whole idea that there are many companies that, they are running for a long time and they don't pay taxes. So how is it that they're not paying taxes? So let's create this minimum tax and catch everybody. So the problem we had with it, and we had those conversations, I think I like what Wanjiru is saying, we had these conversations repeatedly. And it's not just about minimum tax.
Yes.
It's about many other taxes where we are saying this is going to be a problem. In fact, in Kenya, the way I look at it is that we are killing business and the economy with 1,000 cuts. Death by 1,000 cuts.
Yes.
Just a little bit here, they won't feel too much pain. A little bit there. And then at the end of it, it's like we are bleeding and we are about to die. So minimum tax was a very blunt instrument to try and solve a problem which we are not even sure exists. Because they're saying there are all these companies that seem to be running for a long time and they're not paying taxes.
Because they're making losses.
Because they're making losses,
yeah.
Yes. So, of course, perhaps if you're an economist, you'd first ask, why do we have businesses that make losses? There's a problem in our economy.
Right.
Because we should have businesses. I think you'd have thought that would be the first question. But secondly, a lot of them are making what we call tax losses, because you can make a profit and a tax loss.
Yeah.
For instance, in manufacturing, when you build a new factory, you are allowed to deduct the cost of the factory. It's an incentive for you to build a factory because the capital cost is high. So they tell you you can deduct that for your taxes. You get a tax break for a few years as you pay that back.
Yes.
And then you go on. Because then the assumption is that a new factory creates jobs, it adds value to the economy, so we can take a bit of a hit at the beginning. We know we're going to get the money back in the future.
Right.
So if that is why I'm not paying taxes, why is minimum tax now necessary? Secondly, if there is a company you suspect is doing funny business, you send an auditor. That's what you do. You don't decide, which is what they decided.
You don't punish everyone.
That everybody. Yeah. So I was saying it's like we used to get in primary school. You are quietly there doing your work. In class, somebody at the back is making noise. The teacher comes in and the entire class is outside getting a few strokes or whatever. So why are we punishing everybody? And especially, and as you saw, part of the people who went to court around this, it was not just the BMOs we worked with, but even the people like the Kitengela Bar Owners Association, etc. For small businesses, a 1% tax on turnover is huge. Because some people, they don't make that much profit.
Right. Let's go theoretical on this one.
Yeah.
So supposing there's two businesses.
Yes.
One is making loss in a period of, say, 5-6 years.
Yes.
Another makes loss for a period of, say, 1-2 years.
Yeah.
Isn't it conceptually correct that the one making losses for 5-6 years should pay a bit more in terms of the tax than the one making loss for 1 year? They can't all be the same, essentially. Because that was sort of like the base of all this thing.
Yes. Yeah, so, yes. What we are saying, when you pay tax, especially when you talk about income taxes, and I think it's also important to say that when you say they are not paying tax, do they pay VAT? Do they pay their rates?
Right.
Do they have employees who are paying pay as you earn?
Yes.
Are they contributing to NHIF? So the whole concept of that they pay no tax is also, it's not there. What we are saying is they don't pay tax on their profit because they don't have profits. So if you don't have a profit to pay tax off, that's a problem. So what they were going to do, especially now we're saying for the small businesses, you are going to have to go to your pocket. If you just do it mathematically, because if I'm not making a profit, where is this money for the tax coming from?
Yeah.
It is going to come from my pocket, or I am going to have to increase prices so that someone can pay. And all these taxes, we keep saying to Parliament, they always think they are taxing manufacturers, they are taxing banks, they are taxing people. That tax will always trickle down to the consumer. Somebody is going to pay that tax, and it is not going to be the business that ends up paying that tax most of the time.
Yeah, it's painful to listen to, and I think we need to say it because it's the truth. You started off talking about the IMF. We got into the fiscal consolidation program, and the IMF, we have a report actually because we had to review this. When we spoke to the Kenyatta University researchers, we told them, unpack this for us because it doesn't make sense on the face of it to tax businesses out of their own productivity. It hurts everybody. The IMF has imposed high tax policies in different jurisdictions. They've done it in this country before. They come in with policies that don't work. And so we wanted to have a look and see, do these policies work? Yeah. Now, the IMF's argument is that the policies that they have imposed in Kenya were proposed by the Treasury. One way or the other, we have a fiscal consolidation program that prioritizes taxation. And if you read it one way or the other, it looks at restructuring the state-owned enterprises, the loss-making ones. Unfortunately, they also look at tertiary education institutions and the need to privatize them. And we've seen fees is going up.
Yeah.
We can see help is going down. And you're doing this on the back of COVID. So one of the big failures of Parliament is they didn't even bother with the fiscal consolidation program. And it's actually possible that we can argue an illegality for Treasury to sign on to a program without having to pass it through Parliament. The other thing, and we've said this to the IMF, in other jurisdictions, countries have conversations about fiscal consolidation programs. You put it out in the public domain. You have discussions with the stakeholders, so that those who are going to be affected by it have a say in it.
Yeah.
Because the idea is you're saying there's a problem with your fiscal system, your tax system, your expenditure and revenue systems. There's a problem. We need to fix it. And it's going to hurt. A fiscal consolidation is going to hurt. And people need to be told it's going to hurt here for this duration because of this so that they can own it. Now, that didn't happen. Another point, and so I'll digress from that if you allow me to go on to the Eurobond. And just to talk about governance, because like Victor said, we know what happened with Eurobond 1, Eurobond 2. So we've got the Auditor General, Controller of Budget, giving recommendations on the Eurobond and how to ensure transparency. The government tried to maybe there was a little bit of announcement, a little bit more information prior to the floating, but key documents are still not in the public domain. The earmarking of funds, which was one of the key recommendations, is still not done. So we had a look at this and found that with the Eurobonds, commercial borrowing, you'll have an oversubscription, not because there is high confidence in the economy. It's because the repayment terms are so stringent. It's like the Chinese. They'll give you money anyway because they tie you up with their contract such that you must pay.
Right.
Otherwise, you go into serious default, and no government wants that. So, like I said, the government is doing a lot of PR and misinformation. And unfortunately, they're messaging wrongly to Parliament, and Parliament buys this. And in the meantime, they then get into commitments that are very detrimental to the economy, to our growth, and they're going to pass this problem on to the next government. But in the meantime, it's Kenyans who are bearing the brunt of it. Very, very last thing, unfortunately, our laws, whenever enacted, have a protection from liability clause that protects public officers. Because we are saying who's responsible. Mm-hmm. There are officers, there's a whole architecture, a very robust public finance management architecture based on strong principles.
Right.
And a very robust courts, because now our courts have become really our protectors. But how come these laws aren't serving us? It's because those who are supposed to administer the laws are violating them. And it's because we are not able to recall our MPs. We are not able to get that public officer who abuses their office because they are protected. So one of the things we are thinking about doing is actually going to court to see if we can push back against this liability clause so that when you have CS Finance, PS Finance, those directors who see these ridiculous recommendations and pass it, who give wrong information to Parliament, because again, parliamentarians also complain they're given the wrong information. I mean, Parliament has the mechanisms to verify the information. They don't listen to the Parliamentary Budget Office, but they do get the wrong information. Treasury is giving the wrong information. There are officers who are involved in that, and they should be brought to book. Otherwise, we're going to keep having this conversation and just praying that we'll get responsible leaders from somewhere. And it's not happening. And there's no evidence it's going to happen in the near future, unfortunately.
All right, I want to take a short break on that note and to come back and circle back on the question of the responsibility. Who's responsible? Because that's a question that everyone has asked. I'll start with you when we come back on the break. Like, who's responsible? Should we find these people were liable? And from when? 1962, 1992? Take a short break, we'll be back. All right, good evening. You're watching With All Due Respect. Continuation of it. It's depressing, I admit, but the state of affairs is depressing, so we'll not shy away from it. When we took a break, we're going into the political responsibility of what happens. Who should we blame, in essence, and what exactly have they done so that we blame them? We had some great presentation from... so here's the thing, Victor. And I think it's a question of, not just what can be done now, but, to understand the entire spectrum of governance and how, our structure, our political structure essentially feeds, the problems that we have. So how do we start unbundling this problem? For Kenyans who are watching tonight, and it feels like we can't do anything really. It's too big of a problem for us to do anything.
We can't cry anymore. We've cried enough. And I think the responsibility is on us who elect these leaders and give them power to either manage or mismanage our affairs.
Right.
So part of the blame is also on us, the electorate. I do not believe it should cost 10 million to go around a constituency and become an MP. Some spend 50, some spend 60, just to become a member of parliament. If you're earning 1 million, like maybe the MPs earn 1 million per month, over 1 year, that is 60. I mean, that's
12 million.
They need 5 years to get the 60, and then to build a buffer for campaign again. Definitely, they're not just going to earn their income from the salaries alone, because it's too costly. The affairs of politics in this country, do you know how much it costs to become, to wage a proper presidential campaign? In billions, okay? And then you come and sit back and say, this money I spent from my own savings or from my...
To come and save you people because I love you very much.
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
And you don't think that they'll find dubious ways to recoup this? They will, certainly. So I think, who do we get to positions of leadership? Are we getting the right people, all right? And if the right people are outside there and do not want to front themselves for leadership positions and bring sanity, then part of the blame is on us. You see a lot of, I do not want to call them charlatans. I do not want to call them...
With all due respect,
right?
Of course. You've not called them, yes.
I might just as well call them that. And yet, simply because you have the gift of the gab, all right? And you are able to fire the crowd, yes. And you're the noisiest, you're the most loudest, and you can incite people here and there and threaten. That is actually not how we want to run our affairs. We need a developmental state. In fact, James, a policy that I would really want us to start thinking through is a policy of surplus, all right? Any administration that is going out needs to leave a starting capital for the next administration, right? To carry on with.
Right, right.
And when that administration finishes its term and is going out, it leaves a surplus to the next administration, not a burden, right? I really, I don't envy the next administration how they're going to tighten their belts. It is really tough and they don't have any choice.
Victor, economic conversations are political conversations.
Yes, economics triumphs, politics triumphs economics.
Yes.
All right?
Right.
Economic decisions are political decisions.
Right.
Yes.
But it doesn't appear to be that. In our system, in this country, we've not tied the two things together, yeah. Right? We discuss like these are two opposite things. I'm a business person, I don't want to get involved in politics, all right? And politicians don't think business people understand,
Business people are business people. They really do not have to get into politics. I think what attracts people to politics is because what you see happens to your friends who become politicians, all right? So one becomes an MCA, and in 3 short years, his life has changed. One becomes an MP, and you really can't explain where the source of all the wealth that he's gotten. Yeah. All right? They do not have any factories. There's no business. They are not employing anybody. They are members of parliament. They're members of Senate. They're MCS. They are a president. Maybe they're CSS. All right? So when you look at that life, how being a politician can really transform your life in a very short period of time. Everybody wants to get into politics, but that's actually not what we should be doing. Let business people do what they're best at, which is business, but let us get the correct people, all right, who merit, our ablest in the society, right, really should be in the positions of leadership that will drive this country. And we should not look at individual interests. If you're a public servant, you actually are that, a public servant, right? Otherwise, you should just stay away from being in the public service. You're supposed to provide service, effective service that is commensurate with the taxes that the citizens are actually paying. And then save the country from misuse of resources, right? If we waste 700 billion, honestly, in a year, and the president was
on record
to say there is 2 billion every day, all right? There's something wrong. Private sector do not handle treasury. They do not handle KRA, all right? Where do we lose all this money? And who should be blamed? What is the role of parliament in ensuring that government is accountable for all the painful taxes that Kenyans pay? They fail us on that, to be honest.
Right. I'm sure you should almost run for politics, continue from what Victor said, But if you look at the list, whether we believe it or not, of the most richest Kenyans, and the Kenyans who are doing well, they're not in manufacturing.
No.
They're not.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. They just showed up somehow.
And if you can tell who the richest are, yeah.
Yeah.
So I would say, again, with all due respect, there is a bit about our culture, and I think I do agree with the point about, the people we are voting into parliament and so on. But I think, politics is also we tend to think of politicians as leaders, but a lot of the time politicians are actually followers. Because if you find like the Senate today wanting to discuss fuel prices, it is not of their own accord that they woke up. They look at their Twitter feed, they see what's going on Facebook, they hear what's going on radio programs, and they're like, this is something we must do something about.
To appear good.
Yes, so we must appear good. So we actually shape our leaders with the conversations that we have with them and the things that we ask of them. So for instance, right now, and it's great, this is the beginning of the changing, is when we have a program like this, you have people coming on the show to talk about what is going on in the economy. And these are the conversations we need to be asking them, and ask them, so why did you make that choice? Could you explain to us what was the rationale of that choice?
Right.
Despite, and you know, when Jiro mentioned how there is a parliamentary budget office giving them a lot of information, there are bodies like ours, CAM, KEPSA, you know, RETRAC, COFEC.
Constant engagement.
There is constant engagement saying these things. Even with the economists you get on these programs, they'll tell you they've been, you know, shouting from the rooftops trying, but they don't get the, you know, there's no wind behind their sails. There's nobody saying, actually, that guy has a point, and maybe I should ask my MP. When they are now driving around, and like you said, they're even, I see the other day, you see, it's like everybody has to turn up in a helicopter. And I'm just like, what is the cost of this helicopter?
Right. I saw 270 million.
270, you know, it's charged per hour.
Yes.
So, you know, anybody flying around in a helicopter, you should be asking, who's paying for this thing again? And where is this money coming from? Because at the end of the day, the question is, where did the money go? Because we know there is a productive economy out there, but the money has gone somehow. So it is, where did the money go, and who can explain that for us? But we need, I think what we do need is that culture of starting to ask, where did the money go? We also have a disconnect somewhat socially with our, say, socio-politically, with the government. So we tend to think of the government as another entity. And I think one of the Twitter questions did mention about the colonial history. Because the government was somebody who came and took from you.
The construct, yes.
So it's not us. The government is somebody else. But at some stage, we need to come and say, the government is us. I remember visiting Scandinavian countries. You go to Denmark to a business conference. And the business people are saying, we want to grow our economy so we can pay more taxes and fund our social project. They want to pay taxes. It doesn't happen in Kenyan business circles, okay? We don't want to pay
because the money is stolen, of course.
Because the money, that connect and saying, okay, what's the money going to spend on? And then similarly, we on the other hand, we sit with different places. I was joking on our WhatsApp group and asking someone, you know, so do you have a message that I should send on
yes, tonight.
Tonight on the show.
Do you have a message?
And they were like, yes, the bei ya white cap ipunguzwe. That was their message.
Somebody's gone to court on that.
Of course.
So, you know, you're just like, we all want so many things from the government.
Yes.
Like the government is a bottomless pit of money. So there's always like, no, build us this road, build us this dispensary, pay for this, pay for that. And where is this money coming from? So we also need to engage and say that, like we said with our home budgets, we say it would be great to have all these nice things, but there is what we need to spend on.
Yeah.
What is important? Is it our children's education? Is it a roof over our head? Is it food?
Right.
And finally, I think which is very important, it was touched on earlier, is about productivity. And that's the conversation we need to have in our economy. Are we producing more? And like we've seen also in the new KNBS numbers, we are actually reducing in our productivity and our competitiveness. And that, in the long term, becomes the issue that is going to be determine this. You know, so even our debt and so on, you can grow out of your debt if you produce more.
Of course.
But if we're not growing the economy in productive sectors, so if it's something like agriculture, our maize production is going down. We are increasing how much we're importing. I think I saw a number now, we are almost at $2 billion of food that we are importing every year.
Right.
Food which theoretically we could grow, but our maize production is very low.
Keeps on decreasing year by year.
Yeah, especially when you look at it per acre.
Yeah.
Again, it's about the inputs, what's the cost of those inputs. So I also want to say it's not an easy solution, But I think let's change the conversation. Let's not pretend that this is not a problem.
Yes.
This is the issue we need to be discussing. And say even to our politicians, and we are trying to do that as KM, we are going to say to the politicians, what is your solution for this? This is the problem.
It would be nice to have that, to just bring is economic conversation, make them political, right?
Yeah.
And we're going to an election, right, where it's going to be a transition of government, an entire governance structure. But it's missing, the whole conversation of how much debt we're in, how much productivity is declining, and losing competitiveness in East Africa, which is what we essentially are known for. Right?
Yeah, I think politicians, of course, will jump on any popular narrative and make it their own. So I think to an extent you're seeing messaging from the political alignments around the economy.
If they realize it's a thing.
Yes, the hustler narrative is part of that. This bottom-up is part of that. I'm not sure I've heard that from the ruling administration and the co-opted opposition. That I'm not sure you've heard that. But the issue I have is our problem, yes, is very much the political class. I think our problem, and I'll go back to the hard politics, is we have an administration that came in and has mismanaged the economy. Unfortunately, co-opted the opposition and has made a series of very bad decisions, has had very heavy corruption, but they're very good at spin. And so they really don't message honestly, and they confuse a lot of issues. But if we had to cut to the chase and say we have a problem with our economy, we also have a problem with our politics, and we're feeling helpless, what do we do? The dialogues I think that Mushai is talking about are very important, trying to talk to government. But I think the missing link is political organizing by citizens. Because much as BBI needed to be shut down because it was possibly correctly diagnosing that we need to have a national dialogue, but they framed the dialogue wrongly and needed to be shut down.
Right.
We do need a national dialogue. We need a national dialogue about our political culture. We need a national dialogue about our economy. I think we need a national dialogue about citizens and our citizenship and our sovereignty and how we exercise
our place in the society.
Yes, and we need to organize that conversation with the citizens driving it, not the political leaders. Inevitably, I think, let me not even say inevitably, that's the missing link. I think we are all too busy doing, civil society, we are doing our programs, business is doing their business. We are not looking at the bigger picture and saying, you're going to keep doing great work in business, and then government will institute taxes that wipe you out. And we are losing because we are not dealing with this bigger issue. So
how do we do this sort of organization? I hear you, but how do we do it? How do we start getting this sort of organizing, community organizing, get Mushai, and Victor to show up for this?
There have been some efforts.
Yeah.
There's the Linda Katiba and, those kind of conversations. There have been some efforts, but we need the critical mass. If you look at what happened in the 90s, it was individuals coming together, different movements coming together until they reached a point where they said, let's coalesce, because and it was the economy that triggered it.
Right.
Because in the 90s, it was just things got so bad, people got desperate and realized we must do something. And so the different formations, the religious formation and the civil society formations came together. Right now, it's maybe a little bit more complicated, but the need is possibly just as big as it was in the 90s. There are so many parallels.
Or even worse.
Maybe worse. We've gone into a structural adjustment program, just like we did in the 90s. The economy is in decline. Much as government is massaging the figures and telling a different story, we are having reduced competitiveness. We are, losing jobs. Tax is going up, cost of living is going up. So the missing link is the political organizing, and I think the responsibility is on us. It's on organized groups that have power. Because the citizen on the ground, the only power the citizen has is disruptive. And if we're not careful, it's going to be an eruption. Because, if I can't feed my kids and I can't get a job and I'm being forced to confronted with very high cost of living, what happens? You become disruptive.
So all this drives insecurity, and as you wind up, as you make your point, we start winding up. This organizing that is needed, do you think it's something that in your KEPSA, is it a thing that thought about, dreamt about, and that would even your members be interested about?
We're actually very organized as KEPSA in terms of engagement, right? We have supported presidential debates. We have all these dialogues. This is what KEPSA can do, and then there's also what the other citizens outside the business space can do. We have a very open democratic space. I think other countries are envying what appears not to be working in Kenya. They're actually envying. So all these are our aspirations. That can we get to that point where politicians listen and actually take action on what we're doing? It's okay, you can organize, you can talk, it's a good gesture. But if action does not follow that, then it's just as good as a gesture.
Yeah.
You came, you had tea, you had some contacts, right? We have established public-private dialogues, right? These are the mechanisms through which we engage Parliament, Cabinet, the Presidency, Judiciary, right? And there's so much we've achieved through this. But outside this business, policy, legislative workspace is now how do the citizens outside make use of frameworks like public participation frameworks that are there, that are actually in the Constitution. How do they organize and do that, right? How do they organize and hold their elected leaders accountable, right? 100 million in CDF every year is a lot of money to be taken to a particular constituency. It is actually, it can do a lot. And it's a very innovative thing. I had somebody in the tweet that said we adopted a very expensive federal system. I think devolution can do a lot if we manage it better. Devolution can do a lot. So let's not blame the system. Let us blame the mismanagement of that system. Okay. Imagine if all that money that is now going to the counties were kept at the central government level, and then deciding what kind of development are we taking to this constituency at this national level. You'll imagine that they will not be able to consult those people over what they need. But with devolution, I think there's a level of consultation where certain developments are responsive to what people desire.
I agree.
James, there's something I do not want to lose.
As your final point.
On the issue
yes.
Mushai made. Productivity. We just came out from the Global Innovation Index that looked at Africa, and Kenya ranked number 2 as the most innovative in Africa, after South Africa, all right? We have very brilliant people here. Okay. And you can't say there's something we did to bribe our way into being number 2, in the continent. There are parameters that they're looking at, and they looked at all the African countries, and we ranked number 2. I think that's something really worth celebrating. But what do we do with that level of creativity, innovativeness that we have here, right? And the issue of productivity comes in here because the only way we are going to be prosperous is if people are able to earn higher salaries, if people are able to make more money, to earn more money. Mm-hmm. That is actually how your life is going to change.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
We are not saying, but you see, you can't be paid more if your productivity is low.
Okay.
Right?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks. So we have to sort out the issue of productivity
yes.
and use the manpower that we have here that is so innovative to bring about changes and the desired development that we have that we want in this country.
Okay. I have to cut you off. Sorry.
There's something COVID taught us, and in the manufacturing, when we were locked in, there was no food being imported. There were no manufacturing supplies, the raw materials. We actually saw something that we could do. We could actually survive on our own. Okay, so it's actually possible that the 25% of income tax import bill that is in food we can actually produce.
I see.
If we are threatened enough.
So we need to be threatened enough. Mushai, your final words, 30 seconds. Apart from the World Cup going down, surely what can we do as citizens in this? Yes.
Yeah, I think the one thing is put pressure on our parliamentarians. We have one budget to go. Even today, they have regulations in front of them about taxes.
More taxes. The
More
NHIF.
taxes. We want to increase excise tax by, there's been a rule in the Commission of Taxes can increase by inflation, and they've put in a request to Parliament. Let's see what Parliament does. Can they put their money where their mouth is? They have the power. And I think the challenge we've had in our new democracy, that's because it's new since the 2010 Constitution. The judiciary, I think, are the ones who've kind of understood. I guess it's a constitution, they're lawyers, they've understood what their role is. They've understood their independence and what they can do. Parliament, I think, is still struggling with this thing. In other countries, governments come to a standstill because Parliament has refused to pass the budget. And Parliament has that opportunity to say, we are not going to pass this because it affects our people, because it hurts us. And then see what the response of government will be. So can Parliament take up its role and be the guardian of the people who elected them? Those people we saw talking earlier, who is speaking for them? Should be their parliamentarians.
I'm not holding my breath, but 30 seconds.
Right, it's on the people. I think there was a tweet that said that. Parliament has sold us out. The biggest auction house in Africa. Parliament has been a weak link for a long time. We do need to hold them to account, but I think it's us, the people, to organize groups, residents associations, trade associations, citizen groups to come together and push back, have dialogues, educate ourselves, get involved, get engaged.
Thank you very much all. Victor Ogala Kepsa, Mushai Kunyiha, Chairman, Kenya Steel Manufacturers, and obviously Tisa Wanziri Kono. You've all done very well. We can do this up to midnight. With all due respect, let's end it here. My name is James March. We'll do this all over again next week, next time, the same station. Don't go too far.